It is March 16th, 2014. All right, this is by A.T. Jones, and it says, The Greater Purpose. In the calling out of Babylon of old time, there was a greater purpose than only that of their being out of Babylon, and so it is now. This is suggested in the instruction to, quote, let Jerusalem come into your mind, end quote. To be out of Babylon was great, and is great, yet to be in God's purpose for Jerusalem was then and is now far greater than that, even though that be the essential preliminary to this. Jerusalem and the temple of God were to be rebuilt, and the pure worship of God as appointed was to be restored in the world for the blessing and salvation of the nations. And this to tell of the true, the heavenly, the spiritual Jerusalem and temple and worship. And so it is now, except that now it is the true, the heavenly, the spiritual itself that is to be restored and established forevermore. And the lessons of the story of that other one are for our admonition and instruction now. Hence, this line of study upon which we are now entered is one of the greatest and deepest in all the Bible. In that experience of old, the great mass of the people, even of those who came out of Babylon and to Jerusalem, never saw this greater purpose in what they were doing. And this because they did not study the Scriptures and did not hearken even to the living prophet in their own day. Yet it was all in fulfillment of the Scriptures that they were out of Babylon and at Jerusalem at all. This much they could recognize and be thankful for, that the great purpose of all this and the deeper and spiritual things of the Scriptures, they were willing not to know, and so were willing to drift along and back and miss all. And so it is now. Therefore, we must study the Scriptures on this subject. Okay, the heading now is called The Return. The 70 years of captivity in Babylon expired 536 BC, the first year of the reign of Cyrus, the king of Media and Persia. 176 years before this, Isaiah had written the word of the Lord to Cyrus that he should let go my captives, not for price nor reward. Isaiah 45, 1-13. And now Cyrus had come into the kingdom of the world. There he met Daniel, who brought to him this word of the Lord that had been written to him by name 114 years before he was born. Cyrus received this word as the word of God to him, believed in God, and issued his decree as follows. Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven and earth, hath given to me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? His God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is the God, which is in Jerusalem. And whosoever remaineth in any place where he sojourneth, let the men of his place help him with silver and with gold and with goods and with beasts, besides a freewill offering for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. And that's Ezra 1, 2-4. Okay, let's see. Did someone else just join us? Let me move my little chat box down a little bit so I can see. Hey, Carolyn.
Hey, how are you tonight?
I'm just fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Carolyn, I'm reading from The Greater Purpose by A.T. Jones. And
okay.
Yeah, and it's talking about the greater purpose behind the rebuilding of the temple at Jerusalem. And I've gotten to the part where Cyrus has recognized that Isaiah had written a word to him 176 years before, and he accepted it as the word of the Lord to him. And since Isaiah had said, let my people go, Cyrus said, okay. And so he just issued a decree that would allow anyone to go up to Jerusalem and help to rebuild the temple, the house of the Lord. And it says, under this decree, nearly 50,000 people went up to the place of the ruined Jerusalem, taking with them 5,400 of the vessels of gold and silver that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away to Babylon. Zerubbabel was governor, and Joshua, the son of Josedek, was the high priest. On the first day of the 7th month, an altar was erected, and the regular worship was begun. And about 6 months after that, the foundation of the temple was laid. Ezra chapter 3. The opposition. But Satan was against all of this and was determined that it should not succeed. And immediately he started his campaign of opposition. In the land of the 10 tribes that had been desolated 186 years before, there were now the descendants of the heathen peoples who had been put into that emptied land by the kings of Assyria. These people, seeing such a great number of people with more to follow, coming to rebuild Jerusalem, conceived the purpose to join with them and make Jerusalem a mighty fortress, and then, when the time should be right, to revolt and set up a kingdom of their own, embracing Palestine and all the northern country west of the Euphrates. And now, when these, quote, adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers, and said unto them, let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon king of Assur, which brought us up hither. But Zerubbabel and Joshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our God, but we ourselves together will build unto the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus the king of Persia hath commanded us. End quote. Ezra 4, 1-3. Then these adversaries, seeing that their political scheme was not going to carry, revealed their real spirit and, quote, weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, end quote. These hired counselors and tribal officials had it in their power greatly to hinder the operations at Jerusalem, for the funds were supplied from the imperial treasury, and the requisitions for money and materials must pass the counselors and officials at the capital. And among these were the very ones who were under the bribing pay of these adversaries up in the land of Samaria, who could readily hang up and in many ways indefinitely delay any requisition or other paper or document that had to do with affairs at Jerusalem. How powerful this opposition was at the court and headquarters of the kingdom is shown in the 10th chapter of Daniel. The defense. Daniel was the chief subject in the kingdom. Daniel 6:2. He, being in this position and being supremely interested in the work at Jerusalem, could not help being strongly sensible of that grand system of intrigue and particular deviltry that was being carried on in the very court of which he was a part. But against it he could not employ bribery and trickery and counter-intrigue and other deviltry. He could do better. He could appeal to God, and so he says, quote, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks, end quote. When the three whole weeks were fulfilled, the angel of the Lord came to him and said, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, end quote. That tells that the power and the deceitful working of the bribed counselors was so great that for the interests of his cause and work in the world, God did not dare to leave Cyrus alone with them, and Cyrus perfectly friendly to all these interests. And when at last the angel must go to answer Daniel's anxious pleading, another mighty one, quote, Michael, the first of the princes, end quote, must take his place while he was gone. Verses 2, 12, 13, and 20. This gives some idea of how much the brothers at Jerusalem were troubled in their building and their purposes frustrated by the adversaries in Samaria through their hired counselors and officials at the court of Cyrus. And this was continued all the days of Cyrus, 6 years to 529 BC, and all the days of his successor, 7 years to 522, and all the days of his successor, 8 months to 521. Quote, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia, end quote. In the days of Cyrus and his son, the adversaries could not really stop the work of building at Jerusalem, but in the time of Smerdis, the anti-Persian, they succeeded. They wrote to him the letter that is given in Ezra 4:11 through 16, and received the reply given in verses 17 through 22. And with this authority in their hand, they hurried up to Jerusalem, quote, and made them to cease by force and power, end quote. And thus the work was stopped for a little while, more than a year, until the 2nd year of Darius the king, 520 BC. In that year, both the prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, began to call the people again to the building of the temple. And that's interesting that when the prophets came on the scene, then the work began to be started up again. The next title is called The Unseen. In Zechariah's second vision, the secret as well as the mysterious power of all this wide extended campaign of opposition was revealed. Quote, he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him, end quote. Zechariah 3, verse 1. There is the explanation. Satan was the real opposer, the master schemer, and the subtle trickster through all. This also tells that there was a higher plane and a wider field of operations than only that of the plans and actions of men against men. The real field of operations was the unseen. The real contestants were the unseen powers and agencies. The principles were God and Satan, Satan against God, and the purposes involved, pro and con, were the purposes of these. As soon as the work was begun again, the adversaries came up with their opposition. But the builders would not cease, for, quote, the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, that they could not cause them to cease, till the matter came to Darius, end quote. Ezra 5, 3 through 5. Then the adversaries themselves brought the matter to Darius, as in Ezra 5, 7 through 17. As this brought the fine result, as related in Ezra 6, 1 through 13, the adversaries were compelled to aid with speed the work they had so long, so diligently, and at such great expense, done all they could do to hinder. And so, as soon as the prophets came on the scene, the work was finished very quickly. And that was my comment there. Okay, going on, it says, and they builded and finished it. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. Ezra 6, 14 and 15. And it was dedicated, and the full temple worship and service was reestablished in the time of the Passover and feast of the unleavened bread in the month immediately following. Against all the adversaries, that Satan could muster and all the resistance that he could make, the temple of God was finished, and his worship was again fully established in the world in his own chosen place and appointed way at Jerusalem. And I want to make a comment here, and that is that, you know, that part of the issue here is the fact that the children of Israel were chosen to be a light to all the surrounding nations, and they were to show the character of God and his will for mankind through the temple worship. So that was another reason it was so important for that to be finished. It was for his name's sake. And so, okay, so it was, the temple worship was fully established again in the completed temple. It says, but Satan was not yet done. He had failed to prevent God's temple being rebuilt and his own appointed worship being established in his own order. But now he would make utterly vain all of that by sweeping away in a day at one stroke all of God's people in all the vast world empire of the Persians. And this is the story of the book of Esther. Thus, in point of time, the place of the book of Esther is between the 6th and 7th chapters of Ezra. Remember that all of this time, the Persian Empire was the world empire, 127 provinces, from India to the Adriatic and from the Danube to Ethiopia, besides colonies such as Carthage and Cadiz. As the special favorite of the king, hi Leroy, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm reading from The Greater Purpose. I'm on page 3, let's see, the second to the bottom paragraph. You'll need to go back and reread the first part of this study, The Greater Purpose, and it is so awesome. But we're getting up to the point where it establishes that that the purpose of Haman in trying to get rid of all the Jews was because the temple had been rebuilt recently and all the temple worship had been reestablished, and Satan had finally, he'd been beaten in that. You know, he'd been trying for years and years and years to keep that from happening, but it finally happened, and so now he's got another tactic, and that is that he decided to make sure that that in one day and at one stroke, all of God's people and all the vast world empire of the Persians would be done away with. Complete genocide. So, you know, even though God has his temple, there aren't any priests. There's no one. He has no people to carry on the temple worship. Okay, so now it says, as a special favorite of the king, there had now risen to the chief place of power in the empire an Amalekite, Haman the Agagite. The Amalekites were the perpetual and high-handed enemies of Israel and of God. Exodus 17 and 16 in the margin. And this ages-long enmity was now focused in Haman. And now, with Haman in possession of this world sweep of power, Satan planned this master stroke. He would use Haman's power to satisfy Haman's wrath, and at the same time to accomplish Satan's will by blotting out in a day all the Jews in that whole vast empire, and that would nullify all the purpose and all the work of the rebuilding of the temple and the reestablishing of God's own appointed worship in the world, because then none of his people would be left to worship him. Wow. Okay, and then it says, but in all this grand scheme and intended finishing stroke, his failure was more complete and his defeat more overwhelming than ever. And it says, please read here the book of Esther through. So that's what we're going to do. And we probably will only get, I'm guessing, maybe halfway through. But I'm going to pull this up. on my desktop. So so at least, Leroy, you can see it. Because I think most everybody else is a call-in user. But that's okay. Let me see here. All right. And, you know, I think that Trent has explained this before. And, you know, I just think it's important to know that the reason that we're reading from the version that we're reading from is because, can everybody see what, Leroy, can you see what I'm looking right now about the Septuagint version? Okay, I guess not. But anyway, Rebecca sent out that Trent had sent to her, by the way, this version from the E.C. Marsh website, and it's called the long version, and it's actually it's from the Septuagint, and the short version is from the Masoretic text. But we want the long version. That's why we're looking at this one, because the things that were left out, the quote rest of Esther, is actually it wasn't supposed to be thrown in at the end. It actually was left out of the story itself. And so in this version, it's placed into the story where it belongs. And so it makes sense. And so the whole entire story, including the extra books of Esther, are included in this. And this version, it's more true to certain things that it should say. For example, the Septuagint differs from the Masoretic text in the section on in verse 20. The Septuagint reads in translation, Esther had not disclosed her country, such were the instructions of Mordecai, but she was to fear God and keep his laws, just as she had done when she was with him. So Esther did not change her mode of life. And that's an important way of saying that. The Masoretic text reads, Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther did the commandment of Mordecai just as when she was brought up with him. So the versions are different. The Masoretic version omits any direct reference to God or to the law of God. So the Septuagint version that we're going to be looking at is actually much more accurate.
Did you say you were reading from the Septuagint?
Yeah, it's the Septuagint version of the book of Esther, and it's called the long version because it has all those extra books in there. And, oh, Trent typed in the link. Thank you, from what I'm reading from. Okay, thank you. All right, so now I've got this back, and now I'm going to share my application again.
Okay.
All right, so we're looking at chapter 1, and this is from the long version of the book of Esther. And let's see. Leroy, would you mind reading chapter 1, please? I'm kind of tired of reading. Do you mind?
No problem. I just had to figure out how to unmute.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I have a question for somebody. Anybody that knows the answer to this. Now, in this version, the king that I've always heard called Ahasuerus is called Artaxerxes. So I guess his Greek name is Artaxerxes, and so is that the same Artaxerxes that gave the decree to rebuild? No, because it's already been rebuilt. So
yeah, it's
what is it?
yeah, in the one version it says Ahasuerus, or however you pronounce it, and in this one Artaxerxes. But I'm pretty sure in this version of it as well, they even put in more of the Hebrew names, even though it's from the Greek, just because it's the names that we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a different Artaxerxes. But actually, it tells us here the reign of Artaxerxes the Great. So we can look that up because there was a few Artaxerxes, and yeah. So I'm glad that it says Artaxerxes the Great because that will definitely make it more clear.
Okay. Leroy, if you want me to, I can go ahead and start reading.
All right. I got a question that you don't have to answer now, but before I forget it. Kevin last night was saying that the defeat of Nicanor was on the 13th, and then were these happening at the same time, or are they different time periods? You know, the Purim.
Yeah, they were different time periods, but it just happened to fall on the same date.
All right.
The decree that went forth from Artaxerxes fell on the 13th of Adar. Is that right, Trent?
The decree that went forth, you're saying from Artaxerxes for the slaying of the Jews in Esther's day?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's basically, it fell on the 13th. But the thing is that's strange about it is there's a lot of textual variance on that. Like, it'll say, okay, and this is the decree, and it was found, the lot was cast, and it would be on the 13th day.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's some other manuscripts also say on the 14th day. And then they give a decree of the actual the decree. They have an actual copy of the decree, and it says the 13th day. But then later it refers to it again as the 14th day. And then Esther, when she proclaimed that it would be a day of feasting, it was the 13th day. And then later, when you get into the book of Esther, but you find out that it's basically that those who lived in the countries, like in the countryside, they basically dealt with their situation on the 13th day and the 14th day, and those in the cities dealt with it on the 14th day and the 15th day. So there's kind of an overlap, which is why most Jews today basically only keep the 14th day, because that was the one that it happened for both. But the 14th and 15th are the official days of Purim, but the 13th is also a day of gladness that Esther appointed to be a day of gladness before they appointed the other days.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's definitely different times and everything, but yeah, it's the 13th day.
I just think it's so interesting, not coincidental at all. I don't believe that these two times of deliverance, the Nicanor, is it Nicanor? I think that's right.
Yeah.
That situation, which was such a stupendous time of deliverance after they, prayed to the Lord, and then this one too, it's a time of deliverance in which, God just really took care of His people.
And both are right after they reestablished the temple worship.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that about Nicanor.
Yeah, because they had just basically regained the temple and cleansed it. And, so remember when we studied the Maccabees types? And we saw how that fits in, how there's so many things tying the restoration of the temple in the days of the Maccabees with the restoration in the days of the Second Temple, like we're reading about here. And so, yeah, this whole thing with Esther is really showing the same thing because it took place in the days of the Second Temple. So it's really paralleling the whole Nicanor incident quite a lot, or I should say Nicanor is paralleling this.
And then this is paralleling what's happening in our day.
Totally. Yeah. That was interesting what you were reading there from Jones, and just showing the timing of it, the whole story of Esther taking place at that time, where it's like, okay, so now they've returned to build the temple. The temple's been built, the sanctuary service. But you said something about not having the priest to be able to do the job, right? Yeah, it's so timely, and the devil losing the battle with trying to corrupt things in Jerusalem with Joshua and the rest of it. Yeah. It's just really interesting how it's like it was right after that the story of Esther took place.
Yeah. And speaking of the antitype, it's so interesting that the vessels have been brought back. In other words, the sanctuary service and all of the truth that we have now about the feast days and in antitype and the work that's going on in antitype. And now that the mystery of God is being revealed, well, it goes on to talk about that, so maybe I shouldn't get too much into it, but in the greater purpose, and that's why I thought we would read some more after we finish Esther tomorrow night. But anyway, he refers to the fact that the devil's going to try the exact same thing, and in one day he's going to attempt to wipe out all of God's people. And it's right after the temple has been rebuilt, and after the services have been reestablished, and so he's like, okay, well, I didn't stop that. What have I tried before?
Right.
So you're talking about the Sunday law, mark of the beast?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
So Judas Maccabeus, it was in the same time, but he was at the temple, and Esther and those people were in another country, and they came back to the temple, but they were the same time period.
The thing with Judas Maccabeus, that was actually over 100 years after.
Okay.
Yeah, so that it just happened to be during the same time of the year. Like it was during the same, the victory with Nicanor was the 13th day of the 12th month. However many years before that, on the 14th day was, the first day of Purim, and the 13th day also was a feast of gladness where they had victory over the decree of Haman. So it took place the same time of year, but it was decades apart for sure. All right, so anyways, I'll be quiet and let you guys continue.
Yeah, aren't you glad, Trent, that you didn't have to stop your scanning and do the study tonight?
No, I just decided to make a few comments.
Yeah.
I'm alone in the room now, and so I'm not scanning right at the moment.
How many years apart was it again?
I think it was over 100. I don't remember exactly. Okay. Maybe even 200.
All right.
I'd have to go back and check the dates for the Maccabees. But
they were after Esther, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering my question and for your comments. It's been really, really helpful. And I see Tim from Missouri, and thanks for staying from Missouri, has joined us. Welcome. And since this is we're actually going into the 14th day of Adar. This is the time that we're looking at the story of Esther, because the decree went out, most accounts say on the 13th, to kill all the Jews, and then at the same time, it was also put into law because of the Lord's mercy and granting deliverance to His people after they had asked Him for that the Jews could actually fight back. And so yesterday and today, well, we're already into Sunday night, we're already past sundown, so we're into the 14th here, but the 13th, 14th, and 15th of Adar, which correspond to the 16th, 17th, and 18th of March are feast days and days of feasting and gladness, and tomorrow's a day of rest and gladness, and then the next day is a day of feasting again as we think about the deliverance, the great deliverance that the Lord did for their people. So with that being said, we're taking a look at the story of Esther, and that's what's up on the screen. And this is from the website is posted down there in the chat box, but it's ecmarsh.com, and it's the English translation of the Greek Septuagint, which includes all of the, quote, extra books of Esther that are included in the apocryphal writing, or considered to be apocryphal writings. But this version, the English version, English translation of the Greek Septuagint, has those, quote, extra books, the rest of the story actually inserted into the story rather than stuck off at the end. So that's what we're going to look at that. And Leroy, I had asked you to read, and then I thought, well, maybe it wasn't going to be easy for you, but do you want to go ahead and read chapter 1?
Sure.
Okay, great.
In the second year of the reign of Artaxerxes, the great king, on the first day of Nisan, Mardocaius, the son of Jairus, the son of Simeus, the son of Zacchaeus, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Jew dwelling in the city Susa, a great man serving in the king's palace, saw a vision. Now he was of the captivity which Nabuchodonosor, king of Babylon, had carried captive from Jerusalem, with Jeconiah, the king of Judea. And this was his dream. Behold, voices and a noise, thunders and earthquake, tumult upon the earth. And behold, two great serpents came forth, both ready for conflict. And there came from them a great voice, and by their voice every nation was prepared for battle, even to fight against the nation of the just. And behold, a day of darkness and blackness, tribulation and anguish, affection and tumult upon the earth. And all the righteous nation was troubled, fearing their own afflictions, and had prepared to die, and cried to God, and from their cry there came as it were a great river from a low fountain, even much water. And light and the sun arose, and the lowly were exalted, and devoured the honorable. And Mardocaius, who had seen this vision and what God desired to do, having awoke, kept it in his heart, and desired by all means to interpret it, even till night. And we're still having a hard time with that guy's name. Mardocaius rested quiet in the palace with Gabbatha and Tharha, the king's two chamberlains, eunuchs, who guarded the palace. And he heard their reasoning and searched out their plans, and learned that they were preparing to lay hands on King Artaxerxes. And he informed the king concerning them. And the king examined the two chamberlains, and they confessed, and were executed. And the king wrote these things for a memorial. Also Mardocaius wrote concerning these matters. And the king commanded Mardocaius, I like to just say Mordecai.
You know, and that's fine too. That's what we know him as, Mordecai.
All right.
You just say
And
Mordecai.
the king commanded Mordecai to attend in the palace, and gave gifts for his service, this service. And Haman, the son of Hammedathes the Ugian, was honorable in the sight of the king, and he endeavored to hurt Mordecai and his people, because of the two chamberlains of the king. And it came to pass after these things, in the days of Artaxerxes, this Artaxerxes ruled over 130 27 provinces from India. In those days, when King Artaxerxes was on the throne in the city of Susa, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast to his friends in the other nations and to the nobles of the Persians and Medes and the chief of the satraps. And after this, after he had shown to them the wealth of his kingdom and the abundant glory of his wealth during 180 days, when I say the days of the marriage feast were completed, the king made a banquet to the nations who were present in the city 6 days, in the court of the king's house, which was adorned with hangings of fine linen and flax on cords of fine linens and purple, fastened to golden and silver studs on pillars of Parian marble and stone. There were golden and silver couches on the pavement of emerald stone and of pearl, and of Parian stone, and open-worked coverings variously flowered, having roses worked round about, gold and silver cups, and a small cup of carbuncle set out of the value of 30,000 talents, abundant and sweet wine, which the king himself drank. And this banquet was not according to the appointed law, but so the king would have it. And he charged the stewards to perform his will, and that of the company. Also, Esther, the queen, made a banquet for the women in the palace where the king Artaxerxes dwelt. Now on the 7th day, the king, being merry, told Haman and Gazan and Tara and Barazi and Zatol and got some good names, Abatazah and Farabah, the 7 chamberlains, servants of King Artaxerxes, to bring in the queen to him, to enthrone her and crown her with a diadem, and to show her to the princes and her beauty to the nations, for she was beautiful. But Queen, I forgot her real name.
I do too.
Queen Esther hearkened not to him to come with the chamberlains, so the king was grieved and angry. And he said to his friends, "Thus has Esther spoken. Pronounce therefore upon this case law and judgment." So Archisaeus and Sarotheus and Malazir and the princes of the Persians and Medes, who were near the king, who sat chief in rank by the king, drew near to him and reported to him according to the laws how it was proper to do to Queen Esther, because she had not done the things commanded by the king, things commanded of the king by the chamberlains. And Mucius said to the kings and to the princes, "Queen Esther has not wronged the king only, but also all the king's rulers and princes. For he has told them the words of the queen and how she disobeyed the king. As then, said he, she refused to obey King Artaxerxes. So this day shall the other ladies of the chiefs of the Persians and Medes, having heard what she said to the king, dare in the same way to dishonor their husbands. If then it seem good to the king, let him make a royal decree, and let it be written according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, and let him not alter it, and let not the queen come in to him any more, and let the king give her royalty to a woman better than she, and let the law of the king, which he shall have made, be widely proclaimed in his kingdom. And so shall all the women give honor to their husbands, from the poor even to the rich." And the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Mucius had said, and sent into all his kingdom through the several provinces, according to their language, in order that men might be feared in their own houses. Queen Vashti, I think was her name.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's it. I had forgotten, too. Thank you so much, Leroy. Does anybody have any comments about what we've looked at so far, Chapter 1?
Seemed like there was something up at the first part there that seemed a little different than the other version.
The dream at the very first?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's in the canonized Protestant Bible or not. I don't remember reading that in that. I remember reading it in the apocryphal writings.
Talked about two great serpents came forth, well ready for conflict.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's go on. Does anybody have any comments? If no, yeah, and Trent says that the dream is only in the long version. So, anyway, I think that's interesting, you know, that Mordecai had already been prepared that something was going to happen. I mean, I'm assuming that he took that dream as a dream from the Lord. And so he was set up for something. And then he explains the dream at the end. So in chapter...
Like in the movie version, that Haman wanted him to... Haman was given, honor by the king, and everybody's supposed to bow down to him, and Mordecai wouldn't bow down, so that's what it showed the problem was in the regular version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it goes into that coming up. Yeah, that was a real issue. And it's in this version too. Yeah, we're going to see that coming up. Okay, in chapter 2 it says, "And after this the king's anger was pacified, and he no more mentioned Aston, bearing in mind what she had said and how he had condemned her. Then the servants of the king said, Let there be sought for the king chaste and beautiful young virgins, and let the king appoint local governors in all the provinces of his kingdom, and let them select fair and chaste young damsels, and bring them to the provinces of his kingdom, and let them, and bring them to the city Susa, into the women's apartment, and let them be consigned to the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, and let things for purification and other attendance be given to them, and let the woman who shall please the king be clean instead of Aston. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in the city Susa, and his name was Mardochaius, the son of Jairus, the son of Simeas, the son of Sisaias, of the tribe of Benjamin, who had been brought a prisoner from Jerusalem, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried into captivity. And he had a foster child, the daughter of Amminadab, his father's brother, and her name was Esther. And when her parents were dead, he brought her up for a wife from himself, and the damsel was beautiful. Now, I don't remember that in the Bible, in the canonized Bible version, that he was bringing her up to be his wife. But we know that she was not living as his wife at that point, because when she came, when she came to the king, she was a virgin. Okay, and it says, because the king's ordinance was published, many damsels were gathered to the city Susa under the hand of Gaia. And Esther was brought to Gaia, the keeper of the women. And the damsel pleased him, and she found favor in his sight. And he hasted to give her the things for purification, and her portion. And the 7 maidens appointed her out of the palace, and he treated her and her maidens well in the women's apartment. But Esther discovered not her family nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to tell. And let's see, Trent says to everyone, in the version of the Septuagint I have, it says, he brought her up to womanhood as his own. Oh, interesting. Okay, but Mordecai used to walk every day by the women's court to see what would become of Esther. Now, this was the time for a virgin to go into the king, when she should have fulfilled 12 months, for so are the days of purification fulfilled. 6 months while they are anointing themselves with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and women's purification. And then the damsel goes into the king, and the officer, to whomsoever he shall give the command, will bring her to come in with him from the women's apartment to the king's chamber. She enters in the evening, and in the morning she departs to the second women's apartment, where Gaia, the king's chamberlain, is keeper of the women, and she goes not into the king again, unless she should be called by name. I just couldn't help but see some things that kind of jumped out at me, and that is that there were 12 months for purification, and I was, Trent had pointed out just the other day that it's been 12 months since we've been hearing the message of justification by faith, and we've been hearing the true gospel, and we've been being purified, of course, during that time. I don't know if it's just a coincidence or not. That just jumped out at me, and so anyway, if anyone has any ideas about that, let me know. And it just could be coincidence, but it says, when the time came, and when the time was fulfilled for Esther, the daughter of Aminadab, the brother of Mordecai's father, to go into the king, she neglected nothing which the chamberlain, woman's keeper, commanded. For Esther found grace in the sight of all that looked upon her. So Esther went into King Artaxerxes in the 12th month, which is Adar, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther, and she found favor beyond all the other virgins. And he put on her the queen's crown. And the king made a banquet for all his friends and great men for 7 days. And he highly celebrated the marriage of Esther. And he made a release to those who were under his dominion. But Mordecai served in the palace. Now Esther had not discovered her kindred, for so Mordecai commanded her to fear God and perform his commandments as when she was with him. And Esther changed not her manner of life. And 2 chamberlains to the king, the chiefs of the bodyguard, were grieved because Mordecai was promoted, and they sought to kill King Artaxerxes. And the matter was discovered to Mordecai, and he made it known to Esther, and she declared to the king the matter of the conspiracy. And the king examined the 2 chamberlains and hanged them. And the king gave orders to make a note for memorial in the royal records of the good offices of Mordecai as a commendation. Any comments before we go on to chapter 3?
It sounds like a different order of things there. In the movie version that I saw, which was real nice, if nobody's ever seen it before, it was before Esther went into the king that these 2 people were going to kill the king, and that's why Mordecai was promoted, because he warned the king. It sounds like it's afterwards here.
Well, you know what? Actually, it was Esther that Mordecai told, and so it kind of makes more sense this way, that it was after she had become queen, because that's how the king found out about Mordecai's part to play in that conspiracy and his protecting his life.
I might be remembering it wrong, Pop.
Yeah, no. Now the movie version that I saw was called One Night with the King, and that was actually a good one. I mean, I don't remember how true to scripture it was, but it really, I thought it was well done, well acted, and it sure got it across what was going on there.
Well, this one was called Esther, and it was very well done too.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look for that one. Okay, let's see. Unless Tim from Missouri wants to read, I'll just keep on. Okay. And after this, King Artaxerxes highly honored Haman, son of Ammedathes, the Bugian, and exalted him, and set his seat above all his friends. And all in the palace did him obeisance, for so the king had given orders to do. And by the way, that word obeisance means to bow down to. So the king had given orders to do, but Mordecai did not do him obeisance. And they in the king's palace said to Mordecai, Mordecai, why dost thou transgress the commands of the king? Oh, okay, Tim says he doesn't have mine. That's fine. Thus they spoke daily to him, but he hearkened not unto them. So they represented to Haman that Mordecai resisted the commands of the king. And Mordecai had shown to them that he was a Jew. And when Haman understood that Mordecai did not obeisance to him, he was greatly enraged, and took counsel to destroy utterly all the Jews who were under the rule of Artaxerxes. And he made a decree in the 12th year of the reign of Artaxerxes, and cast lots daily and monthly to slay in one day the race of Mordecai, and the lot fell on the 14th day of the month, which is Adar. Oh, no, that is different. In this version, it's the 14th day. And I believe in the canonized Bible, it's the 13th. I think that's right. And he spoke to King Artaxerxes, saying, There is a nation scattered among the nations in all thy kingdom, and their laws differ from these of all the other nations, and they disobey the laws of the king, and it is not expedient for the king to let them alone. If it seems good to the king, let him make a decree to destroy them, and I will remit into the king's treasury 10,000 talents of silver. And the king took off his ring and gave it into the hands of Haman to seal the decrees against the Jews. And the king said to Haman, Keep the silver and treat the nation as thou wilt. So the king's recorders were called in the first month on the 13th day, and they wrote as Haman commanded to the captains and governors in every province, from India even to Ethiopia, to 127 provinces, and to the rulers of the nations according to their several languages, in the name of King Artaxerxes. And the message was sent by posts throughout the kingdom of Artaxerxes to destroy utterly the race of the Jews on the first day of the 12th month, which is Adar, and to plunder their goods. And the following is a copy of the letter. The great king Artaxerxes writes thus to the rulers and inferior governors of 127 provinces, from India even to Ethiopia, who hold authority under him. Ruling over many nations and having obtained dominion over the whole world, I was minded, not elated by the confidence of power, but ever conducting myself with great moderation and gentleness, to make the lives of my subjects continually tranquil, desiring both to maintain the kingdom quiet and orderly to its utmost limits, and to restore the peace desired by all men. But when I had inquired of my counselors how this should be brought to pass, Haman, who excels in soundness of judgment among us, and has been manifestly well inclined without wavering with unshaken fidelity, and had obtained the second post in the kingdom, informed us that a certain ill-disposed people is mixed up with all the tribes throughout the world, opposed in their law to every other nation, and continually neglecting the commands of the king, so that the united government blamelessly administered by us is not quietly established. Having then conceived that this nation alone of all others is continually set in opposition to every man, introducing as a change a foreign code of laws, and injuriously plotting to accomplish the worst evils against our interests and against the happy establishment of the monarchy, we signify to you in the letter written by Haman, who is set over the public affairs and is our second governor, to destroy them all utterly with their wives and children by the swords of the enemies, without pitying or sparing any, on the 14th day of the 12th month of Adar of the present year, that the people aforetime and now ill-disposed to us, having been violently consigned to death in one day, may hereafter secure to us continually a well-constituted and quiet state of affairs. And the copies of the letters were published in every province, and an order was given to all the nations to be ready against that day. And the business was hastened, and that at Susa, and the king and Haman began to drink, but the city was troubled. I think that's a good place to stop right there, and we'll just pick up in, this is not a long book. We have 6 more chapters to go, and we can easily get through that tomorrow. So, are there any comments? This is a little different than what we're used to reading in the canonized version of the Bible.
I had a thought, I don't know if it has to do with anything, but the Catholic Church is kind of scattered in all the nations of the world, you know. They're going to want to, they want to take over the world. They weren't allowed into this country at first, you know. Now they're, Sister White says they're got a church on every street corner.
Yeah, and you know, now they've kind of gone undercover by having the Protestants with their ecumenicalism movement. They have just taken their doctrines and moved it right into the Protestant church. And so now we're told that it's actually going to be the apostate Protestantism that's going to bring about the Sunday law. I couldn't help but notice, you know, as it was describing this nation that needs to be wiped out because, you know, their laws are different and you know, they're basically wrecking the unity. I remember when we were kicked out of our church, that was the big thing, you know, that we were ruining the unity, you know, and so on. But I was just thinking about how that really applies to those of us that will not go along with the idea of a one-world religion in which all doctrines are fine to believe, and those of us that, you know, that adhere to our peculiar doctrines and refuse to give up certain beliefs and certain codes of behavior and so on, we're going to really be considered, as Trent says, troublemakers. That's for sure.
We're already considered that by our own church.
Yeah, that's it. You know, like I said, the example that I have is on a small, in the macro, I guess you'd say, or the microcosm. But yeah, it's the same spirit behind that. And
don't rock the boat.
Yeah, don't rock the boat. But you know what? It's always been the boat rockers that have been the true followers of Christ. And the thing of it is, you know, we can see the handwriting on the wall, you know, because we know that what we're going through, what we're getting ready to go through, is the antitype of this situation. But the thing of it is we see what God did. We see what He did in the situation with Nicanor. We see what He did in the situation with Esther. We know that He will protect His people for His name's sake. And He determines that the harvest will go forward, and He will be able to collect all of His children out of Babylon, and, well, first of all, you know, out of the Church of the Laodiceans, and then out of Babylon, and then all the heathens. And so we know that He's going to protect us. He has to have a people to do this, and He's been purifying us and revealing to us you know, the true gospel. And so we know that He will protect us through it.
All things work together for good, so it's actually going to be, what we go through is going to help the gathering of, you know, make the people ready to join God's people.
Yes, because when they see the true character of the people that are of the religious leaders, that is going to show the honest in heart what the truth is and who has the truth. You know, when we went through and Teresa was at the same time being kicked out, and then two others of our church, it was interesting. I mean, if you go back to that church now, it's a completely different church. There are dozens of people that left when they saw the true character of the leadership. So those are going to be the people. Those are the ones that in the Ezekiel 5 study, the ones that are being chased with a sword, I believe. Anyway, they're the ones that are going to be able to hear the truth soon. We have the truth as our testimony. And Trent says, oh, by the way, Teresa says hi to you all. She's been busy at work, so wasn't able to make it on. And we all tell her hi. Hi, Teresa.
Hello, Teresa.
Well, are there any other comments?
I just wanted to say I really like that version of the long version of Esther. I had read it about a week ago. It was really good.
Isn't that good?
Oh, yeah.
I agree, Lynn. I like it.
It still
amazes
me how...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it just still amazes me, and it always will, how things mesh in the Bible, written back then, and how it pertains to us today, and it's just so perfect, and it is just incomprehensible how anything like that could happen by accident. It just can't. It's just marvelous the way it's all put together.
It is, and it's so marvelous that we get to see the big picture now. I
know.
I love that. You know, that all the puzzle pieces are fitting together, and we see that all of these incidents are related. And when we read the greater purpose, it's just so beautiful, and you just see it's all about the Lord glorifying His name. It's all about Him having a place and a people where He can demonstrate His true sanctuary service, so that He can demonstrate the gospel, so that He can just teach people the gospel and His character. And
here we are.
And here we are. That's right. And the temple is being rebuilt, and the true temple is in us.
Awesome.
It is awesome. Well, and I think, you know, I love having this be a two-parter, because I think when we kind of let all of this roll around in our mind and our hearts, you know, overnight and then tomorrow, and then when we come back tomorrow, it's really going to be nice to finish this up. So,
well, thanks for leading out for us.
Oh, you're welcome.
That was a big kingdom, too, 126 provinces.
Ah, that was a big kingdom. Oh, and Trent says to everyone, Happy Purim, everyone. Smiley face. All right. Well, if there aren't any other comments, then we'll close out with prayer, and we'll see each other tomorrow. This is nice to get to be together 2 days in a row.
And again tomorrow,
too? Actually, this is the third day in a row, and so it'll be 4 days in a row. Does anyone want to volunteer to pray?
I can pray.
Okay.
Our kind Heavenly Family, we come before your throne, thanking you so much for the privilege of being here in this time of history to see the wonderful things that are happening and to be a part of the ministry that will bring the closing gospel to the rest of the world. And it's just humbling to be in this spot. And we thank you so much. We thank you for this book of Esther that will give us deeper understanding on where we stand in Earth's history and what may happen or will happen. And we thank you for being with us each day, imparting your strength to overcome temptation on a daily and hourly and minute basis. And we just thank you for that from the bottoms of our hearts. Thank you so much for watching over us with your protection and your power each day. Our angels are with us constantly, and they're just so wonderful to do your work for us, watching over us. Be with us so that we might find as much time as possible to study. Be with Trent and Teresa, that they might finish their scanning as quickly as possible. We know that they're just so diligently working on that, and we just hope and pray that you will let us know whatever it is you would like us to do to further your work. And we just give you all the praise in the name of the branch. And she. Amen.
Amen. Well, happy Purim, everybody.